Nikki Haley ran for president against Donald Trump in the Republican Party. And she stayed in past Ron DeSantis, past every other challenger. Tim Scott, everyone. Doug Burgum, Vivek Ramaswamy, like everybody that was challenging Trump dropped out and Nikki Haley stayed in. And the thing that was interesting about Nikki Haley staying in is she wasn't performing terribly. She wasn't performing in a margin that would see her get victory, but it was enough of a margin to easily contest the race and to go to the Republican National Committee when this happens, which now she's at, with some delegates if she was to keep it going. And when Donald Trump says, if you don't drop out, we will not allow any Nikki Haley staffers to associate with us, we won't work with them. That was the message that the Trump camp was putting out. They kept going, they kept staying in, and they kept getting votes. And certain states getting 20%, other states getting 30 to 35%. And when we're talking about 30 to 35% in some of these states, I mean, we're talking about 200,000 voters in states that are swing states. And when you look at the exit polling from those states, a lot of those people are never Trumpers who are saying that in a race between Trump and Biden, they'll go to Biden. And that's why they're with Haley. They're with Haley because they don't want Trump to be president again after what he did with January 6th, after what he did with trying to overturn the election results, after the fact that he is now a convicted felon, and they don't want that to represent the party of law and order, or any other number of reasons that have motivated them against Trump. And when we're talking about, 5% of the overall party, 10% of the overall party, it might not matter that much. But when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of voters in swing states where the margins could be as small as 10 to 20,000. And when we're talking about Georgia, when Trump was trying to intimidate the Georgia Secretary of State to get him to flip the election results, the number he told him was a little roughly around 14,000, just to show you how slim these margins can be. So in a swing state, those margins can matter. But she was steadfast in her opposition to Donald Trump and continued to stay out of the race. To continue to stay in the race and not drop out. And she kept going, she kept going, and she kept going until eventually dropping out. And even after dropping out, mind you, once it was clear she had no path to victory, and she was just not able to find any path that she could argue that she has to stay in for, then she dropped out. But even after she dropped out, she was still getting 15% and even 20% in some of the states that she was still on the ballot on, even if she dropped out. Indicating that even with Nikki Haley wasn't even running, people will still write her name over Donald Trump's in the Republican primary, indicating dissatisfaction. And so there was even some talk that even though Donald Trump had said, I don't want to work with Nikki Haley at all, and that's what the Trump team was, and screw Nikki Haley, that because there was this much dissatisfaction, exit polling was indicating that a decent chunk of Nikki Haley voters might not vote for Trump in the general, and he needs these votes in order to win the election. Maybe he would choose her as a VP or offer her some, peace trinket. We have not found out if there was any peace trinket, but she certainly hasn't gotten the position of VP. That has gone to J.D. Vance. So Nikki Haley ran a campaign talking about how Trump is authoritarian, Trump is a child, Trump is bad in all these ways, and how she can't endorse Trump, and she's going to stay silent on that until now we're at the RNC convention, and she's got speaking time. And here she decides that she is going to endorse Donald Trump. And I don't know how much we're going to play. I think instead of playing the whole speech from Team Nikki Haley, because it's it's 10 minutes long, how about we just play this section chosen by a Voice of America journalist, so we don't have to watch the full thing. So you can see her endorsing Donald Trump.
I'll start by making one thing perfectly clear. Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period. For the sake of our nation, we have to go with Donald Trump. You don't have to agree with Trump 100% of the time to vote for him. Take it from me, I haven't always agreed with President Trump. But we agree more often than we disagree. We agree on keeping America strong. We agree on keeping America safe. And we agree that Democrats have moved so far to the left that they're putting our freedoms in danger.
Joe Biden is 81 years old. He is not some left-wing communist. He wanted to beat the Soviet Union, and he was in Congress during the Cold War. He is not some far left loon. He was the most moderate option of the entire Democratic primary field. The idea that the guy that Lindsey Graham was calling decent and questioning how anyone could question the decency of Joe Biden just back in 2015, 2016, before politics got so much more toxic than it is now. I mean, not to say that there wasn't toxicity before, but just to say that there wasn't this view that he was some far left loon. You could maybe say that about Bernie Sanders, even though I align much more with Bernie Sanders than I do with Joe Biden. But you can't say that with Joe Biden. You cannot use that to justify voting for Donald Trump after condemning him again and again and again and again. When it comes to Donald Trump is the best person to protect America and keep America strong. I mean, you are going after Donald Trump for not only previous comments about veterans, but about his complete lack of knowledge on foreign policy issues, getting upstage on the international stage, and standing with the authoritarians who don't want America safe, what she believes don't want America safe. It doesn't make any sense after the barbed wires that were thrown back and forth by the Nikki Haley team and the Donald Trump team, and the reasons she says that she was challenging Donald Trump. If she wants to be there to pick up the pieces when Trump is gone, to say, look, now that the MAGA movement has failed again, we have to move on. She can try to fulfill that role, but it's going to be a lot harder if she sticks her name, bumper sticker, at the back of the movement saying this is a good idea. Maybe this is politicking in a way where, hey, if I'm against Donald Trump, then people could blame us for our failure, blame me for their failures. But if I get on the Trump train just enough and give it a thumbs up after going hard against him in the primary, then I'll have enough favor with the Trumpists and enough favor with my own old faction to never like the Trumpists and the never Trumpers who like me, then I'll be able to pick up the... I have no clue what the mental math is going on or what political calculations are being made, but this has no principle to it, especially when you see her previous comments about the man.
Because when he went off his teleprompter, what he said was unbelievable. He said that not only would he not defend our allies, but that he would actually encourage Putin to invade our allies.
This is the guy that she said is going to keep America safe and keep us in the world safe. It does not match up. She is explaining that she understands the stakes. She understands his generally anti-Atlantic relations tendencies and how he could degrade deterrence with comments like this. Even if he's only doing it to get a few extra dimes out of our European allies, as his defenders will say, will the Russians only read it that way? How did the Russians read Donald Trump holding up Zelensky after the aid had already been approved by Congress and he had no constitutional authority to block it? How would the Russians react to that information, that he blocked that aid? Would it be that, oh, his main priority is supporting Ukraine, or is his main priority getting information out of Zelensky? If he's saying something like that, are the Russians thinking, oh, his main priority is having a stiff, strong Article 5 as a deterrence against Russian encroachment in Europe? Or, oh, his most important thing is the money. His most important thing is defense commitments. His most important thing is the restructuring of NATO and the eastward pivot, and to do that to pull back from Europe. What is the message that's being sent? That's the question. And she understands the stakes to this extent because, I mean, she was representative at the UN. And even though I disagree with her on a whole host of foreign policy issues, probably disagree with her on way more, probably 60, 70% of issues, she at least has some foreign policy know-how and some general knowledge to understand the damage that this does. And so it comes naturally to her to call that out. When she was saying this on the campaign trail, the reason that Never Trumpers and others who were Trump hesitant, as you may want to call them, whatever you want to say, were attracted to her because it seemed like what she was saying is genuine. What she was saying is what many Republicans with more foreign policy experience or more experience on the Hill, or isn't bought into the populist jibber jabber of Donald Trump, probably really think it came naturally from her. So to see this flip flop like this, and to see the stale smile on the RNC stage, it just all feels like such a clear facade. It feels like somebody trying to set themselves up to pick up the pieces after the Watergate scandal.
Now think about what that means. You encourage Putin to invade our allies. That means Trump is siding with a thug, where 500,000 people have died or been wounded because Putin invaded Ukraine. Trump is siding with a dictator who kills his political opponents. Trump is siding with a tyrant who arrests American journalists and holds them hostage. Trump is siding with someone who has made no bones about wanting to destroy America. And Trump's going to side with Putin over the allies that stood with us.
I mean, like, look, I'm not even, like, I would even say to some extent, like, you could even say, like, alarmism, like, he's siding with those who want to destroy America. Well, it is true, the Russians do want eternal division in the United States. It is undoubtedly true. Maybe somebody defending Trump could make the argument, like, well, maybe he wants to fundamentally change relations. But I would give her the benefit of the doubt here, because I generally agree with her, because that is what the Russians want to do. They do want eternal division in the United States. But if what she's saying is what she believes, putting aside any fair debate you could have about it, if that's what she believes, that Trump is siding with people who want to destroy America, how can you, less than a year later, get up on the stage and say, this is the man who's ready to protect America? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. From her neoconservative roots, from her, like, the John Bolton-esque people around her that love her for her foreign policy, foreign policy stick, how could you justify this at all? You can't outside of politicking.
Us at 9/11? What are you saying? Because in that 1 second, he made all of our allies vulnerable. In that 1 second, he emboldened Putin. In that 1 second, he put every military member who's serving in those countries in danger. That is not moral clarity.
How can you say he's endangering our soldiers and he's the best person to protect us?
And then he went a step further and decided to mock my husband's military service. Now let me say this. Michael and I can handle it. When you're in politics, it's open season. But you mock one member of the military, you're mocking every member of the military.
Picking the person who mocks military members, according to Haley. But this is her new standard. This is her justification. When Barack Obama was president, Vladimir Putin invaded Crimea. When Joe Biden is president, Putin invaded all of Ukraine. But when Donald Trump was president, Putin did nothing. No invasions, no wars. That was no accident. Putin didn't attack Ukraine because he knew Donald Trump was tough. A strong president doesn't start wars. A strong president prevents them. That's interesting, because that's not what she said less than a year ago.
He was completely wrong, because every time he was in the same room with him, he got...
She's talking about Putin. Every time that Trump was in the same room with Putin...
He was completely wrong, because every time he was in the same room with him, he got weak in the knees. We can't have a president that gets weak in the knees with Putin. We have to have a president that's going to be strong with Putin in every sense of the word.
It's just like a complete 180. It's just like a complete 180. If there was some, like... If I was being showed, like, oh, here is where she's fundamentally changed our foreign policy view, or here is how Trump has shifted internally on his foreign policy view. Like, if I was told, like, hey, you know when Bernie dropped out in 2020 and there was this idea that a deal had been made so he would accept some more progressive policies to absorb the Bernie guys into the fold, to try to march on to victory in November and, you know, perform better. Maybe if there was something like, hey, Trump, if you guarantee that you won't challenge the results of the election come election day, maybe you can get me on. Or hey, maybe if you take a different position on Ukraine or X foreign policies, or maybe you could get my more fervent support. Maybe I'll even be part of the administration. But I've been given no indication that has happened. I mean, In fact, let me point to something here. This is from Laura Loomer, and Laura Loomer is a adult. She is a Neanderthal. When anytime she waves at anybody, you see gravel fall on the floor because the dirt has gotten between her knuckles because she was dragging them everywhere. Right? She is not an intelligent person. She fell from any number of hoaxes around the war in Ukraine. She's fallen for any number of hoaxes on any other number of issues. She famously handcuffed herself to Twitter HQ to try to protest herself getting banned after she called for a non-Muslim taxi service, but then only handcuffed herself to one door so the employees could just walk around her, as she emblazoned herself with the Star of David to compare her getting Twitter banned from Twitter to the Holocaust. So I don't respect Laura Loomer, multiple-time election loser and Trump fanatic, but she is somehow one of the Trump-endorsed candidates when she did run for Congress. Putting it all aside, she posted this clip, and I did think it was funny because it does seem like what she's saying here is true. Last night, Nikki Haley lied and said President Trump wanted her to speak at the RNC convention. When she said that, President Trump turned to JD Vance and said, she actually wanted to speak. Here we go. She wanted. Look at this.
President Trump asked me to speak to this convention in the name of unity.
Look, I can't tell if that's for sure what he said, but it would be very funny if that is what he said. Either way, we have been given no public indication of any movement from Trump on foreign policy issues in reference to her, of her getting placed in any administration positions. It might be that she legitimately is just staying in the circle, staying in the room, like I said, waiting for the Jenga tower to come down to pick up the pieces. That could be her role. That might be why she was so aggressive, even after Trump said, I won't allow you into my administration. But she cannot, when this is all over, claim that she wasn't part of the MAGA movement, that she did not sign her name to this. Because if she's endorsing him for president of the United States and is not sitting out of it, like, for example, John Bolton, who, again, is somebody I'm not a big fan of, that's somebody just sitting out of it, not endorsing Trump, not endorsing Biden. He can endorse Biden. He could be like, look, I think Trump's as much of a threat, but he doesn't do that. He just sit out of it. She could have done the same thing too. But maybe she just needs to stay in with the Republican insiders to pick up those pieces. So this might all just be politics, but either way, she signed herself to a campaign of somebody that she says is friends with those who want to destroy America, but he's going to protect America. I don't think her position's consistent. I think this is pure politics, and it's plain as day to see.